Welcome to session 5 of the myofascial release course. This particular practice, we're going to be focusing on the shoulders and really looking at the shoulder from a very much a 360 perspective. So we'll be working into some of the muscles that attach into the front of the shoulder, the pecs. We'll also work a little bit through the upper traps and the top of the shoulder. We'll explore some of the muscles literally that kind of cuff around the shoulder joint itself, where the arm connects into the collarbone, and then we'll also be looking at some work at the back of the shoulder and then underneath. So a complete overview of the shoulder. I'm going to be showing you most of the techniques using a wall today, and I really like using the wall because you can reduce the pressure if it's really tender, but you can also apply more pressure if you need it. Some of these techniques can be done on the ground, but it's a little bit harder to modulate the pressure once you're on the floor and you have a little bit less maneuverability. So I tend to start with these practices at the wall. And then we'll do a couple of practices at the very end of the practice that will be down on the ground. So you'll just need a couple of myofascial balls. Ideally, if they come in a tote bag, you'll keep the tote as well for a couple of the techniques. If you don't have a tote bag, feel free to just put 2 balls in a sock and then tie it up. And I'll also be using a yoga block, which will act as a bit of a spacer between me and the wall for some of the techniques. So we're going to begin our practice with working into the pecs. And you'll want to just use the 1 ball for this first technique. And we're going to be exploring the muscles literally right underneath your collarbone. So it can be helpful to just palpate in there, get a sense of the collarbone as it attaches right into the sternum here, the breastbone, and then right out to the kind of edge of the shoulder. And we're going to be putting the ball right into that joint where the collarbone and the breastbone connect. We'll pause here and do a little bit of massage into that, and then we'll start to explore moving the ball underneath the collarbone and right into the sort of the hollow just in front or inside of the shoulder joint. We'll do some work here, and I'll give you the option to move your arm around as we come into it. So coming to stand, and I'm going to use the block here as my spacer, and I'm going to put the ball right into that little notch just below the collarbone, where the collarbone and the breastbone meet. And this can often be a slightly tender spot. You can relax the side of the arm that you're working on here. And I'm just going to lean in and just begin by taking a few deep breaths, letting the out breath help you sink in maybe a little more into the ball. And then I'm going to play with just some little light circles on that point. If you want less pressure, you just walk your feet in a bit closer to the wall. And if you need a little bit more pressure, you walk your feet slightly away from the wall. Now, from here, I'm going to take my arm out to the side. Just want to make sure the block doesn't go anywhere there. And I'm just going to start to slide the ball from side to side underneath the collarbone. You don't have to have the arm out to the side. You could just keep it down by your side, but I find that the arm out to the side just gives me a little more sensation here. Again, it can be quite tender, so less is more. We're not looking to move into anything sharply painful. If you find a particularly good spot, you could just be still, or you could explore maybe taking the arm up over the head, down, and you could even slide the hand around onto the lower back with the palm facing up and just letting the shoulder come slightly forwards. Just playing a little bit with these wall snow angels. And then I'm going to move the ball now right into the sort of the outer edge, so right into the sort of the hollow where the the arm bone kind of connects into the collarbone. And I'm going to just pause here. And again, you might just be still. This might feel plenty, or you could do little micro rocks, or again, play a little bit with some arm movements. Again, just staying within a range that feels tolerable, not too much. But these pec muscles, again, can be surprisingly pretty tender. And when they're tight, they have a tendency to roll your shoulder forwards and lead to kind of exacerbate that slightly hunched and rounded posture. Take another breath, and whatever you're noticing here. Great. And then we'll release the arm down, and we'll do the same thing on the second side. So again, I'm starting by bringing the ball right underneath the collarbone and just to the inner edge of the breastbone. And again, just exploring a level of pressure here that feels useful. Taking some deep breaths, seeing if you can breathe all the way down into your abdomen. And if the body gives you the go-ahead that it's okay to move, maybe finding those little circles, just exploring small movements. This can often have quite a bruised kind of feel to it. And then I'm going to take the arm out to the side and just start to slide the ball right underneath the collarbone. Sometimes if we're very tight here, the ribs can almost get sort of glued up to the collarbone, and this can cause all sorts of issues, including it can really sort of limit the natural movement of the collarbone. It can have an impact on breathing patterns, and again also kind of tie into shoulder mobility issues. You could find a spot there may be several. The whole area might be quite tender, but you feel free to play around again, maybe taking the arm behind the back, maybe spider crawling the fingers up the wall towards overhead, and just again exploring these different angles. Be curious, as always, if if one side is feeling a little more restricted. And then I'm going to move the ball right into the hollow of the front of the shoulder, just slightly above the armpit, and lean in there. And again, you can do some little micro movements, circles, and maybe exploring some different positions of the arm. And monitor your breathing to ensure that you're not holding your breath, which is so easy to do, particularly in these more tender spots. I think I could stay here all day, but for the sake of time, feel free to pause the video if you find any particular areas you want to spend a bit longer on. But just release that and just take a moment just to pause and feel. And you may sense the shoulders can relax a little bit more. Maybe there's a feeling of warmth or circulation around the pecs, and maybe a little more movement of the ribs with your breath. Now, the next technique we're going to work on are the muscles really above the collarbone now. And we're looking for this sort of triangle of soft tissue above the collarbone. If you trace it out to the sort of the edge here, you'll feel a little bony lump just at the top of the shoulder. And then this sort of border of the upper traps, you can feel the sort of muscular ridge. This is the area where most of us often feel like we really want to have our massage done. And what we're going to do is put the ball right into the top of the shoulder here. So I'm going to be going just above the collarbone and right into that soft tissue. Now, in order to get the technique here, we need to get the ball coming straight down. So for this one, I'm going to put the block on a wider setting. This is just to make sure that I have some space for my face, my head. And I'm going to put one leg forwards, the other leg back, and I'm going to bend the knees and hinge forwards from the hips, keeping my back quite straight. And I'm going to take the ball onto the block and then lean in. And I've got my other hand just sort of holding the ball a little bit so it's not going to suddenly slip out. And I can relax the arm of the shoulder that I'm working on down towards the ground. Now I'm leaning in with enough pressure so that the ball is not going to go anywhere. And I'm just applying a firm kind of downward pressure right through the top of the shoulder. And this is already pretty intense. So again, you can lean in less or more depending on what you're noticing. And I'm just going to start to swing that arm from side to side, just letting it hang, letting it swing really fluidly there. So this can be, again, another very tender area for a lot of people. If you're feeling plenty, just stay like this, take a few breaths. If you want to add a little bit, you could turn the head away from the arm that you're working on. So I'm working on my left side and I'm going to apply that pressure and then just turn and rotate my head to the right. And I feel that as a deeper stretch now, and then turn the head back. So I'm gazing to the floor. So I'm just turning the head to the right, away from the ball, and then bringing the face down. You could add to the rotation of the head here a sliding of that left arm back behind you. So now I'm kind of stretching the tissues at both ends here, turning the head to the right and sliding the left hand onto the lower back and then releasing. For some of you, this might create a little bit of a referral, so the dull ache maybe into the head or into the forehead or temples. This can be sort of tension headache territory for many people. And then release. And I usually find that's about enough for that technique. It's quite intense. So let's try the other side. So again, I've got the ball on the block, and then I want to lean in, I want to hinge in and get that downward pressure. So the ball is applying a direct pressure down, and then you need to lean in with enough pressure there so that obviously the block and the ball are not going to go anywhere. I'm also going to just hold that ball with my left hand so it's not going to go. And now the right arm, which I'm working on the right shoulder, I'm going to just swing it from side to side. This also works really well doing it sort of through a doorway. So doing this on a door ledge so that your head has the space to go through the doorway. And again, if this is really tender, to stay as you are. You can make tiny little micro movements in that top part of the shoulder, or you can turn the head. So now I'm working on my right shoulder, so I'm going to turn my head to the left. And release. I like to do about 2 or 3 of these. And if you want, that last option is to turn the head away from the ball and then slide the hand up onto the lower back and then release. You can feel that go all the way up into my side of my neck and up into the scalp even. And then release. Ooh, and that one, pretty tender. So see how that feels. Again, you can just set the props down. Maybe the shoulders are feeling like they can sink a little bit away from the ears. Great one to do if you tend to be a shoulder huncher. So we're now going to go onto the back of the shoulder blade. And again, we'll just use the one ball for this one. And so I will work on my right side. I'm going to bring the ball up and underneath with my left hand. And I'm just getting the ball right onto the back of the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade's not actually that big a surface area. I'm on the muscles that sort of line the back of the shoulder blade here. Once the ball is into position, I can lean in and apply some body weight so the ball's not going to go anywhere. And I can just relax that arm down. And I'm just going to find a little movement here. Again, not very much, side to side, up and down. And I'm just looking for any tender spots. I'll just show you from this angle. So I'm right on the back of the shoulder blade and just moving around on that general area. And it's winter on your nose. All right, so just exploring, and if you find a tender spot, you might just pause, be still. Again, less pressure, stay a bit closer to the wall. If you need more pressure, walk your feet a bit further from the wall. And I'm sort of not quite side onto the wall. I'm not quite facing into the center of the room. I'm sort of on a bit of a diagonal here to get the right angle. Now you could just play with those little micro movements or be still. Another option is to bring the arm into like a 90-degree position and play a little bit with some windshield wipering actions of the forearm and elbow. So I'm taking my shoulder into internal and external rotation. And that's definitely bringing me into contact with some of the key rotator cuff muscles, teres minor and infraspinatus. Interested in anatomy. You could also play with sliding the arm up a little bit overhead as well. Just let experimentation guide you here. What movements feel helpful, if any. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. I'll show you from the back view here. So I'm coming underneath and bringing the ball right into the back of the shoulder blade. And then sliding around a little bit on that area. Using my legs to move a little. You find a good spot. I found a good trigger point here. You can just relax, be still. Oftentimes trigger points for this area will refer into the front of the shoulder and even into the sort of bicep tendon area. So again, back off if that feels sharp or really uncomfortable. We're not trying to aggravate tissues here. And this is particularly important if you are working with, you know, a sort of more chronic injury. Just go really gentle. Monitor your breath. Make sure you're not holding your breath. And you could add, if you like, a little bit of movement of the arm, finding those windshield wipers. Maybe sliding the arm up and overhead. Great. And then as you're ready, releasing and coming away from the wall. And again, noticing you may, as I say, feel quite a shift already starting to happen. We've worked into the front, the top, the back. And for our last little practice at the wall before we come down onto the ground, you're going to take the two balls now, pop them into their tote bag or into their tied sock. And we're going to do a little work specifically on the deltoids. The deltoid is a muscle that wraps like a cuff around the top of the shoulder. There's an anterior portion, a lateral, and a posterior portion. And we're just really going to work our way around this cuff. So the first one I'm going to do is to put the balls on the front. And again, I'll use the block here. I've got the block running lengthways now, so I have a little bit of place to move. And I'm going to lean in and place the balls right on the sort of front of the shoulder here. And I'm just going to use my legs to lean in and roll a little bit up and down the sort of front portion. I don't need to go all the way down onto the arm, although you could, but for today we're really just focusing on that more localized area on the front of the shoulder. Now you could also find a spot, so if you find something a little tender there, and play a little bit with rotating the arm and spiraling the arm and the palm. Few of those. If you needed more intensity, you could do this with one ball as well. It's a little trickier to sort of control, but it definitely will give you a bit more intensity and a bit more opportunity trigger point. Now I'm going to come to the side of the upper arm, and again leaning in, and then using my legs here. I just want to make sure I'm right in that sort of upper part, and using my legs to really push in and slide the ball down. And again, the toted bags are going to be a little less targeted, so you could do this with the one ball. I find the toted balls are a little more stable, and I'm just really pushing through my legs and my feet to get a good level of pressure there. Again, you can find a spot, maybe do a little spiraling of the arm, turning and rotating the arm bone in the shoulder socket. And then I'm going to keep going now and work my way around to the back of the upper arm. Again, really leaning in. And just trying to scrub the back of the upper arm, really where the deltoids and the triceps sort of overlap one another. There's often some good spots in there. Again, leaning in, maybe finding that little spiral of the arm bone. Okay, and then we'll do exactly the same thing on the second side. So I'm coming in to the front of the arm, and on the right side now, whichever is your second side. And again, I'm staying pretty high up on the sort of shoulder, the front of the shoulder joint. Really working into the sort of bicep tendon. This can be a particularly helpful one if you've got some sort of chronic bicep tendinopathy type issues. Help to stimulate the connective tissue, the repair processes here. You just obviously want to be mindful that you're not overdoing it. And then you can be still, find a little rotation here. Notice that as I rotate the arm, it's not just the hand and the forearm that's moving, it's really all the way up into the upper arm bone in the shoulder socket. I'm going to come side on and work into the deltoids here. Using the legs to push some pressure through that. Feels really good. And then leaning in and finding these spirals. And then I'm going to work my way around to the back of the upper arm. Ladies with long hair, make sure you don't get it caught up in the myofascial balls. It's really unpleasant. Leaning back. Just that first sort of couple of inches of the upper arm. And again, playing with some spiral action here. This is a great one just to get some glide of the tissue, some hydration, blood flow again, and circulation. And then release and relax. Okay, and again, take a moment to feel as you go through this whole sequence, just noticing any shifts. And you can always do some arm raises before and after these techniques as well, and just see if the range of movement of your arms has changed in any way too. Now, we're going to come down onto the floor for the last couple of techniques. And for this first one, we're going to work into a muscle called subscapularis. And to show you, first of all, we're going to be taking the thumb right into the back of the armpit. And if you wrap your fingers around, you'll sort of catch your shoulder blade here. So where the thumb is, that's where the ball's going to be going. Notice that I'm not pushing into the armpit and kind of into the body. I'm really pushing, I'm going to be getting the ball right into the back of the armpit, contacting the front edge of the shoulder blade. And we're going for a muscle called the subscapularis, which is another one of the rotator cuff muscles, which when it's tight tends to roll the shoulder forwards. And also limits arm overhead movement. So by releasing this muscle, it'll help to keep the shoulder back in a good alignment, and it might free your overhead arm range of movement as well. So for this one, you'll use a block and a myofascial ball, and we're going to be putting the ball right into the back of the armpit. Now this arm that I'm releasing here, I'm just going to have it out to the side, and my body is not quite side on, and I'm not quite all the way turned down. I'm sort of, again, on a bit of an angle, and then I'm just leaning. As I turn my chest a bit more towards the floor, I can feel now the ball pushing right up into the back of the armpit. Now this is one of those ones, again, can be surprisingly pretty sore, so you don't need to apply a lot of pressure here. See how you go. Lean in. It's not a big surface area we're working on, so for most people, just being still, breathing, holding for 30 to 60 seconds is enough. If you're feeling really good here, there is the option of finding a little bit of rocking movement, or maybe moving the arm a little bit. This is pretty tender for me, so I'm going to just stay and breathe. This could be a great release for, again, rotator cuff issues, and for people who play a lot of kind of racket sports that require good range of movement, arms overhead. I can feel the tissue sort of beginning to give a little bit, so it's worth holding for at least a minute. So the sustained compression. Okay, and then I'm going to come out of that and we'll switch to the second side. So same idea here. I'm going to take the ball on the block, any setup in the legs that kind of works for you, and I'm going to put the ball right into the back of the armpit. So I'm right in, and I can feel the ball sort of pushing up into the front of the shoulder blade, and then I'm just turning the chest down a little bit. This is one of those ones you'll know when you're on something here. Again, I'm just being a little mindful of the alignment for this one. Obviously, you don't want to push straight into the hollow of the armpit. We've got some important lymphatic tissue and blood vessels, nerves. So I'm making sure I'm on the sort of front of the shoulder blade, as it were. If you get any numbness or tingling in your arms, come out of this one. And that's really true for all of these. You know, there's a lot of nerve tissue around the shoulder, and we don't want to aggravate the nerves. So if you get tingling in the fingers, it's usually just a sign we just need to move the balls a little bit, or just stop that particular technique. Just a few more breaths. You can play a little bit with lifting and lowering the arm, or moving the arm. What's available there. All right, so our last technique, we're going to go for the upper traps. This is always, I think, a favorite. It's going to move a little bit. So we're going to be working into the top of the upper traps and identifying that sort of ridge of tissue. This is sort of the border of the upper traps right at the top here. And we're going to be putting the two myofascial balls right into the upper traps on each side. So I'll be putting them kind of up, right on the upper part. When you come into this, the balls will be sort of lodged into position with your body weight, and then we'll be using the block to elevate the hips. So I'm going to come to lie down on my back, and I'm going to tuck one ball in at a time. And I'm just going into that sort of corner edge where the neck and the upper shoulders meet. I'm right on that sort of scruff of the upper traps there. My body weight is sort of lodging the balls into position. If you were looking at yourself from the ceiling down, you'd probably just see the edge of the balls poking out there. And then it's optional, but I find putting something underneath the hips just helps to kind of further lodge the balls in and put a little bit more pressure into that. Now, for a lot of people, this is plenty. Sometimes it feels really good to do a little bit of gentle rocking, moving up and down a little bit, just trying to sort of scrub through like a rolling pin those upper traps. Another option, if you need a little bit more, is you could lift and lower the hips, and obviously the higher your pelvis is, the more downward pressure into the balls, and that's pretty good. You can again rock a little bit up and down. So all of these are just suggestions, options. It really is about just taking the time to explore and experiment. This can be very tender for some people. So I've done this for a while. I'm kind of fairly used to this, but please do less, and you could also just be still if you need to. Now, another option is to move the arms. So we keep the back still and we experiment. You'll notice taking the arms over the head probably ups the ante quite a bit. So you could just lift and lower the arms. You could explore taking the arms out to the sides and down, maybe drawing circles with the arms. Really, any movements of the arms are fair game here. So see what really speaks to your body, to your nervous system. This can be such a great way to really get to understand where you personally hold tension in your body. So treat this like a little experiment, investigation. This if one side is more vivid. Again, if you're getting any referral sensations, again, this could be a great one for people who get regular tension headaches. Just taking a few more breaths. Exploring arm movement, hip movement, or being still. And when you've had enough, you can move the block out from underneath, slide the balls out from underneath your head, and just come to lie for a few moments and just notice. And there may be an involuntary sigh or a yawn or a deeper breath that needs to be expressed after that. Notice any shifts in the natural breath or just in the way that the body is landing on the ground, your relationship to gravity. Maybe the shoulders can really sort of drop back into the floor. And then when you're ready to come up, just rolling to your side and using your hands to come up. So I hope that that was helpful as a 360 exploration of the shoulders. As always, feel free to just choose one or two of the techniques that you found were particularly helpful, and repeat as needed. Thanks for joining me.